Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. In the club today, Meta removes fact-checking from Facebook. Journalist and editor Alex Hudson looks at what it means for news organisations. Also on the programme, Global scraps regional radio and Bauer buys ClearChannel. And why is sport suddenly the streamer's new focus? Broadcast consultant Paul Robinson looks at recent deals by DAZN and Disney. All that plus Hollywood drama in podcast form. Goldhawk Productions chief John Dryden talks about the explosion in demand for audio fiction. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Before we get into the main stories of the week, let's hear our guests' recommendations to join the club. Alex, you've been working on Bradford City of Culture this year. Anyone you'd like to add to the club?
Entirely shamelessly. So the creative director, Shanaz Gulzar, has been all over the TV. I was sat in Luton Airport watching her on BBC Breakfast. She's been on Asian Network. The official launch is tomorrow night, and so there are, of course, so many things that I'm not allowed to talk about that she's going to be on tomorrow. And I don't think she has slept for days because of the amount of time she's had to move around from studio to studio to studio, having to do. Bradford is going to be fantastic this year, of course. Entirely shameless. So
they've hit it's going to be cold on Friday night, isn't it?
So the launch is an outdoor event for 10,000 people, and rumour has it it's still going to be fantastic. Bradford might be slightly chilly, but it's in the centre of Bradford. It should be fun.
I did read that there is hot chocolate and hot food to keep
there
everyone
will
warm.
be food carts, and then lots of performers and lots of sort of art and magic and drones and all sorts of nonsense.
Great. We'll look forward to seeing that. And Paul, welcome. Who have you added to the Media Club roles this week?
I'm just going to Bradford. I did my MBA there, the BBC MBA. We used to go to a curry house. That's what warmed up us up in Bradford. My nomination is Tony Chambers, who's just been appointed as president of Disney EMEA. Someone who's been, I would say, behind the scenes. He's been at Disney 25 years, not a very high-profile exec, but someone who's got a great reputation. Staff love him. The senior management clearly love him, and he's now got a big job, which is to really drive Disney EMEA. And I think to get synergies out of those different businesses, they've not been really working together. And obviously Disney is, like everybody, looking at cost cutting and how to get more out of the same. So Tony Chambers, welcome. I was
having a bit of a look at that because, big companies, they centralise, then they bring it back out again. Where are we in at the moment? He becomes sort of P&L responsible?
He's P&L responsible. I think Disney's going back to regional autonomy, a bit, moving away a bit from central control. I imagine Bob Iger is probably driving that because certainly in his heyday, that was the model. But you're right. In the time I was there, Disney went back to centralized control and they fired all the presidents and it was all run from Burbank. But I think he's a good appointment. He gets a very good book. Everyone says good things about him. Big job, but good luck to him.
He can definitely join the club. Okay, we'll kick off the new year with predictably the influence of Donald Trump's election on the media more generally. And Mark Zuckerberg has announced Meta will no longer be fact-checking its content, leaving it to things like community notes, just like X does. Alex, fact-checking, expensive business. Is that the real reason he stopped getting involved? It just didn't work, did it?
It kind of is. So the best reaction I've seen to this is from The Shovel, and I'm going to paraphrase it because some of the words are a little bit not broadcastable. But there's former Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, dead at 36, so social media sites should not fact-check posts. As tributes flowed in from across the world, Zuckerberg said people had right to hear a range of views and that censorship was anti-democratic. He is survived by his 8 children and 3 wives. And the point is, fact-checking is expensive, it is hard, it is something that news publishers really, really struggle with doing. And all that Facebook is trying to say and all that Meta is trying to say, that it's not a publisher, it's just a platform, it's just a photocopier, it's just a fax machine. And maybe the first time I was on here, like maybe 10 years ago, I'd probably have agreed with them. But algorithmically, they are profiting from the choices they make, the millions of choices every day they make. And Facebook and Meta and Zuckerberg has made that call purely because they are making sure that the Republican Party don't come after them. And what free speech means to Elon Musk, and what free speech means to Mark Zuckerberg, and what free speech means to Donald Trump, and what free speech means to actually what free speech means are 3, 4, 5, 6 very different things. And actually, there's always that meme that goes around that the truth has a left-wing bias. And it's how you manage that in an age where the more outrage, the more the algorithm rewards the outrage. And you might see, as has happened at X, the more polarizing views and the more difficult views get more and more traction. and then Elon Musk calls for everyone to be calm.
Paul, is this all about just kissing the ring? I mean, all of the big tech companies have stumped up $1 million for Trump's inauguration. They're all saying the things he wants to hear. Is it what they believe, or just self-preservation?
Well, I mean, 2 points really. I think first of all, remember he's only the president of the United States. There are more Facebook users outside the US than there are in the US. So this is an American company, so therefore I understand why they're reacting in the way they are. I think it's a trust and maybe even a commercial issue here. I mean, I do think that if you say we're going to stop all fact-checking, that is going to have an impact on how much you trust that platform and the extent to which you're going to use it. And it may well be it ends up just being the extremists, the weirdos, and those who want to, push an extreme view who can't do it any other way, who end up on Facebook, and the average Joe disappears. And I think, the other issue is, will certain advertisers want to be associated with the sort of content if it's full of salacious, horrible, biased, and not just biased politically. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, managing political bias always a problem, I mean, the BBC always say, don't they, we get complaints from both sides. Probably means we get it about right. And I think that's probably fair. But if it's full of really nasty, unpleasant stuff, I think you can see brands walking away.
Is it also, Alex, that Facebook, whatever they do is always wrong? So why not just go light touch?
The argument for it is that they are suddenly then handing it to the community. So if their fact checks are wrong, it is no longer Facebook's fault.
It is now
the community's fault.
Is Community Notes a serviceable moderation model?
No, but in a way the fact checking thing wasn't. So they spent they only spent 0.000 how many noughts is that? 3 noughts, 3% of its 29 revenue according to Popular Information on the fact checking service. But ultimately, because of the international fact checking network, Meta was reportedly pressuring them to let in more a less robust fact checkers within that service, and so Meta was already getting critiqued for not being without bias with its trying to remove bias, and you were getting things flagged, as I've had personal experience with, from the fact checkers, that were perfectly factually sound, and things that were a little bit spurious not being put through. So it was a broken system, but the community notes can't make it better; it will only make it worse. But
why do you say that?
It has taken Wikipedia maybe 20 years to have that system where it knows if something is going to crop up, and it knows when to shut pages down, and it knows when you work up credit scores around your communities, and you understand the trusted authors, and Wikipedia has spent so long on that, and now it's pristinely done. And so if Facebook want to hothouse that, and if Meta Properties want to hothouse that and do something similar, it's Wikipedia's whole business model, and they still have taken 20 years to get it right. It's not Facebook's whole business model. It's not Meta's whole business model. They make money from outrage rather than from factual information.
Do you think the product even exists within Facebook? Because obviously they've said, hey, it's going to be Community Notes. Have they got it ready to just turn on? I haven't seen any beta testing of it, or no one's
You can do a sprint.
It?
The number of developers within Facebook, you could sprint that within 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's not a difficult thing to do, to repurpose the current fact checking model and make it more community focused, but it's how do you get up votes, down votes? What's the mechanic around what is true? And then the difficulty is, what is a fact? What is an opinion? How do you differentiate? What is the exact nuance? And fact checkers across the industry have trouble with working out exactly where that line is. Give it to the community, it's going to be messy.
Okay, a couple of radio stories that are currently breaking. Just read on radio today earlier that Global have announced the end of local and regional radio at their brands, closing whole offices across the UK and focusing on a sort of a station, a brand for the nations, for England, Scotland and Wales. Meanwhile, Bauer, their biggest commercial rival, have announced they've bought ClearChannel Europe. That's the out-of-home advertising business, the sort of the billboards, for $625 million, I think. Decent amount of cash for Bauer to spend on some poster sites.
It is not unsensible, though, because it gives it more control over the advertising market. Global made a similar acquisition a few years ago, and that's proved to be very successful for them, not only in terms of bringing cash into the business, but also in terms of being able to use it to promote their own brands, and they've done that very successfully. When they're not sold, you promote your own radio stations, and they've done that very, very well. So I can understand why Bauer's doing that. Bauer looking for growth. So I think in terms of advertising, controlling the market, and also promoting their own brands, it makes a lot of sense. The price is high, but I reckon they'll get a payback on that in a couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good for them. I mean, Global global's done very well from digital billboards for inventory and popping up ads for their radio stations. I mean, if you look at the ratings for kind of global versus Bauer, and obviously there's a lot of reasons why ratings go up, but global are in the ascendance where Bauer is pretty flat. Do you think that's partly because global have got access to a lot more marketing of their stations on things like billboards?
I mean, I haven't seen the numbers in terms of the spend, but my perception is I'm much more aware of marketing for the global brands than for the Bauer brands. I think also global benefit from some heritage names that we all know, you know, Classic FM, Heart, Capital. Greatest hits radio, not quite so powerful, I think, as brands at this point. So I guess really Bauer need to overspend global per capita to get to where they are. I'm sure that Bauer will use this to help to drive ratings up. I mean, it's not as though they're collapsing. Commercial radio is in a very, very rude health at the moment. But yeah, Bauer need to do some work. I mean, and I think they've still got work to do to get beyond just talking about Ken Bruce and Simon Mayo.
Well, let's talk about those radio brands in a sec. I mean, Alex, if you are a publisher, if you're a media operator, kind of having access to more media to try and promote your outlets is pretty essential. Otherwise, it gets really expensive.
You don't need. It's all about organic growth. So the content is king. You don't need billboards to promote your content.
Really, do you think you can totally be on organic?
It has to be. I think as much as we might like to think.
Sorry, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
The case of the prosecution.
The case for content. Yeah. So the algorithms are the absolute champion of whatever. So whatever the audience is engaging with, and TikTok is leading the way with this algorithm. Well, for the next 10 days at least, and that means that watch times and things that are really engaging audiences will then be turned into marketing. So then you can put the sort of call to action at the end of it. And what you are seeing is iteration and experimentation by design, and then you're seeing people move quickly. And YouTube and TikTok are the only two games in town when it comes to that sort of marketing spend. So having better content and more storytelling, so 2025 might well be the sort of age of going back to storytelling and marketing, but it's going to be really difficult for people because no one is seeing ads online, or fewer and fewer people are seeing ads online because of the ad blockers, because now Edge and Chrome and Firefox blocking them as standard. And in real life, people have become so blind to it. So you walk through YouTube every day, you see 100 ads, and it's only when you see an ad 20, 30, 40 times until you even recognize that you've even seen an ad. So, and I appreciate all of this sort of subliminal advertising and all of that. It still has the mechanic, but actually people making a choice to watch your advert or your content is the key thing here, and billboard marketing doesn't drive it in the way that it used to, I would say.
So, Paul, I mean, Alex isn't wrong in that people are spending time on these digital platforms. There's a lot more ad avoidance. On TikTok, actually, you can do very well growing brand awareness if you're clever about the content. Is traditional TV ads or billboards, is it just a bit old-fashioned?
No, I mean, just on the TikTok point, I'd also make the point that YouTube has got ubiquity, TikTok hasn't. If you look, for example, at viewers to Netflix and Disney, their use of TikTok is quite low. TikTok is not a medium you use if you want to promote a Netflix or Disney show. So I don't quite agree with that. I think the thing about out of home is it's just building awareness. You can't have a campaign that's purely based on out of home. But all the evidence is it does build awareness. And the thing about radio, you've got to remember, is that radio is quite difficult to navigate. Even if you're on DAB, you've got to search through a whole load of stations organized alphabetically. And the risk is, like any EPG, you stop at the top. If you want to get further down, I mean, there's evidence if your station's got, A or B or C at the front, Capital's a better name therefore than Heart, you're going to do better. To go down further into that list and to choose it, you need to have some awareness of that brand and need to have some sort of reason for choosing it. And the other point I'd make is that we've still got a rating system based on aided recall. And there's evidence that out of home will help aided recall. So in terms of getting your ratings, out of home is absolutely quite important in driving those numbers, because it's about, what you recall. It's not about what you actually did. It's what you remember doing.
And then maybe with Spotify messing it up, actually this could be the way radio is really fighting back. There's a huge opportunity as more and more people turn away from Spotify because of the AI automation, because of the removing of staff, because of the algorithm being messed up by the lack of servicing on it. There is a potential there for radio to make a play this year.
I don't think radio's fighting fighting back. I don't think radio's gone away. I mean, 1 billion listener hours has been the same sort of number for the last 15 years. So radio's been strong the whole time. I don't think it's a fight back. I think it might be about continuing to be as strong as it is, but it's not a fight back.
Well, I think one of the obviously we've talked a lot about on the show about the challenges for younger audiences sometimes, and
that's true.
And their reach is still pretty strong. Volume has maybe changed a little bit.
That's absolutely true.
But I mean, on the radio side, so yes, news this week. Global for most of their main radio brands, so for Heart, for Capital, and Smooth, had elements of regional programming alongside local news and travel and weather. They've got to keep the local travel, news and weather, but they don't have to do regional programming anymore, and they've chosen not to. So Heart and Capital are going to lose their drive time shows. Smooth's going to lose their breakfast shows in England, all going to be one bit of output from London. Paul, is this something that, I mean, we've sort of known this is coming? Is this a surprise? Is it not really a surprise?
No, I mean, when the Act passed last year, I think it was obvious it's going to happen. It was a question of when. Global have moved pretty fast. I mean, they can still, as you say, insert all of the information and critically local advertising digitally. You don't need premises in offices in different parts of the country to do that. You could argue that the shows which come from different offices, they're still playing similar records. Are they really doing very much that's local? Is it the information content that really counts, and that will still be there? For Global, it's going to simplify the business because operationally it's difficult having lots of people in different parts of the country, having it all in London, easier to manage. Obviously, cost reduction and particularly elimination of lots of fixed costs. So buildings, heat, light, power, all that sort of stuff, all gone. So not a surprise at all. Will it impact their audiences? We'll see. I suspect not very much. Will it improve their margins? Absolutely.
It's been 20 shows I think will go as part of these changes. I think February 24th will be around the last show for these people. Is there a talent pipeline issue with all of this? A lot of successful radio presenters have kind of come from local radio and worked their way up. Is this bad news for radio station in the future, or will they just find talent on YouTube and TikTok and
it's
other
bad
places?
news for local audiences. So it's less about, so it's so difficult to make a local show just through advertising. So how you build out paid for platforms and how you understand what people will pay for the community around it and the sort of localness and feeling like they're part of that group. But when it comes to the pipeline, I think that comes from podcasting primarily. That will come from YouTube, that will come from TikTok, that will come from all of these places. And I think if a young aspirant producer or presenter wanted to build their way into a sort of national radio show, they would do that through their show reel on TikTok or through YouTube. They wouldn't be doing that through local radio or showcasing their editing skills through podcasting, which is still one of the biggest growth markets, and there is still so much opportunity there to spike and hit something big.
Do you think there's a talent issue, Paul, or actually radio is always plucked from different places?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I mean, I do feel sad for those people who are losing their jobs.
Absolutely,
I really do. I think that's hard. That's tough. And will they find employment elsewhere? That's going to be also very, very difficult.
I think a lot of those people have great skills to use in other areas. And it's going to be harder to find like-for-like radio jobs.
So I think that's tough. I mean, I think that is the human side of it is very tough. But I do agree about the talent. It's always come from different places. I mean, I also say that, thinking about some of those audiences, younger audiences aren't going to want to play, records for older audiences anyway on radio, so they wouldn't be a natural fit anyway. I think it's inevitable. I think Bauer will probably follow suit. We'll wait and see.
A couple of deals over Christmas that seem to be part of a new trend. Disney's Hulu Plus Live TV working with Fubo, and then Foxtel in Australia being sold to DAZN. Paul, both of these are at streamers kind of getting into live sport rights. Is this the trend of the future? Well,
I think it's interesting. What is the big driver of streaming? And we've seen Netflix and Amazon play around with sport, and they've sort of dabbled. We've got Warner Brothers with TNT Sports really investing. They own the Olympics, obviously. They've increasingly been buying rights in different markets. They've also been promoting their sport with some of their movies. Red One, the Dwayne Johnson movie was absolutely tied in with TNT Sports to promote it. Now these two additional signs, I think, that sport is being seen probably as the streaming next sort of super weapon. And of course, the thing about it is that you've got to consume it at the time it's consumed. It's the time it's created. So it creates an immediacy. DAZN have always been a live sports organisation, British company owned by Perform Group. And boxing's been a huge thing for them and other things. And they've been trying to sort of, fill out their proposition. They've got about 60 million customers, but they really need to build scale. So this gives them a bit more scale. Foxtel was up for sale. Murdoch's wanted to sell it for a long time.
So Foxtel's sort of like the Sky of Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It was controlled by Murdoch, but he hadn't got a majority stake, which was a fascinating piece of
and a telco,
corporate governance.
Yeah.
I mean, Telstra's in there and various others. So Foxtel's been, not growing for a while. Australia's an interesting market. It's very much a free TV market, and pay TV is struggling. So they wanted to get out. DAZN saw the opportunity. So I think they're going to use that, obviously, to put sport on all those existing streaming services. Being an Australian company, they've got some great names for their streaming services. They've got KO, Binge, and Hubble, which is absolutely right, isn't it? And then, the other one, the Disney one, is that this gives them control of Fubo. Fubo was in legal dispute with Disney and Warner Brothers, which was argument about them basically using their leverage to obtain sports rights inappropriately. That settles the legal case, but it gives Disney now, with ESPN and Hulu and Disney Plus, a really powerful opportunity to put live and pre-recorded sport.
Yeah, so Hulu and actually YouTube have this as well, and Fubo. They're sort of like virtual cable networks, aren't they?
Sort of. I mean, Hulu is actually a streaming network, but it's treated like a cable network. ESPN obviously was a cable network, but ESPN is rapidly reinventing itself as a streaming service.
And Disney want to work alongside some other rights holders to launch a sports service, don't they, together?
They do. And I mean, I think you're going to see Disney competing now for rights. It's interesting seeing in Asia, one or two of the traditional players who have the EPL rights, the Premier League rights, have just lost them. The most recent one being in Thailand, where the incumbent pay TV broadcast that had those rights for 20 years, a company called True Visions, have just lost them to the telco. So I think you're going to see, I mean, for rights owners, it's great. I mean, the Premier League are loving this because prices are only going to go up.
Alex, you've been watching WWE on Netflix. Their big
Of
new
course.
signing.
WWE makes sense in a way that like you were saying about Amazon and Netflix, sort of moving away from the traditional sports angles. Actually, how much people are still going to watch the live broadcast. There are football journalists are split on this about how much people are wanting to watch the full 90 minutes, and actually more and more are watching just the highlights, particularly for younger audiences. And then it's how the promos of doing those goals, of doing those like 2-minute highlight programs free to air on YouTube or across social networks, how much that drives subscriptions or payments into it. And I think as audiences get more and more one service or two services only, Sky sort of looking at it and they're not sure that the sports thing is the thing that is converting, and so there's a big bet on these platforms are making, and I don't know if it's going to work. It's very expensive. But it's super, like you were saying, for the rights holders, it's super exciting time.
Sky is interesting. Sorry, very briefly. I mean, the big question here actually is whether Sky will survive, because Sky and Comcast, big though they are, haven't got enough scale. And if Sky were to lose some of the key sports rights, given they've just solved their dispute with Warner's over the movies,
their HBO problem,
that's gone away. But if Sky was to lose the sport, I think that would have substantially negative impact on their subscriber base.
Well, one to keep an eye on this year. Thank you both. Alex, we're going to swap you out. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you soon. And Paul, stick around. We're talking more in a sec after these messages.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about the most important things we learned about podcasting in 2024. From figuring out what your show is and who it's for, to what assets you should be making and where you need to be putting them. There's all sorts of things you need to consider when putting together your marketing plan for 2025. To find out more about what we can do for your podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
I don't know about you, but I always find getting back into the swing of things after the holiday break a bit of a struggle, which is why it's so important that when we come to record our podcast, everything's already set up and ready to go. That's where Podshop comes in. Their Shoreditch studio offers a reliable setup that makes it super simple to create a fast turnaround show at high quality. From choosing the right equipment to managing the recording process, Podshop takes all of the hassle out of podcasting so we can stay focused on what really matters, delivering great content to you. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned pro, Podshop ensures your podcast sounds amazing and helps you come across the expert you are. And for a limited time, you can get 25% off your first booking at Podshop Studios, where we record our show each week. Just use the code MEDIACLUB when booking at podshoponline.co.uk. That's podshoponline.co.uk. Welcome back. It's not all news in the Media Club. Oh no, there's always space for gossip. So here's what we've been talking about this week. The Radio Academy's awards, the ARIAs, are open for entries now, with Bob Shannon chairing the judging panel. For the first time, the ceremony will be held in Leicester Square, just a stone's throw from Global Radio's headquarters. And stones may well be thrown, as the network hasn't taken part in the ARIAs for quite a while. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan and News UK have finally parted ways, something most commentators had predicted since the show went online only last summer. Morgan now takes ownership of his 3 million YouTube subscribers just as Trump re-enters the White House. Is that all a channel needs for success? And BBC DG Tim Davie brought together some top drama execs for a secret meeting, it was revealed in Deadline this week. It comes as producer Jane Featherstone told MPs that the BBC was struggling to fund multiple series on its books. Paul, many projects are stuck in what it says here is soft green light. Are you aware of soft green light?
Well, green light has lots of different meanings. I mean, certainly if you're in a Hollywood studio, you've got to have 75% of the money to green light. I guess it means you're sort of hopefully going to get it, but maybe you haven't actually got it yet.
Yes. Or that they want it, they're just not entirely sure how to pay for it.
That's true. I mean, it is challenging. I mean, I think that's interesting that it seems as though the old co-production model is actually rearing its ugly head. And going back to the idea of knocking on doors and broadcasters and getting maybe someone to put in the first 30, and then you can start, getting a bit more, and maybe you top up with some loans or some venture capital or something. That model seems to be coming back.
Yes, and as everything gets much more expensive as well.
Yeah, I mean, the problem for the BBC is they haven't got scale. I mean, they haven't got enough scale, and of course to compete.
Which is kind of a mad thing to say, isn't it? Really,
it is. But has any local broadcaster in any country, even including the US, got enough scale now? I think that's the issue, because these giants are huge. I mean, they really are. I mean, Netflix, Disney, Amazon. I mean, how do you compete with those guys? So for the BBC, and drama is very important. Why is drama important? Because it's the number one driver of the license fee. If you look at why people actually pay for the BBC, drama always comes out top, with comedy second.
Joining me now is John Dryden, who runs Goldhawk Productions. No stranger to Hollywood-style storytelling, but in radio and podcasts. Have you suffered from any soft green lights in your career?
It's very interesting, this meeting at the BBC, because I would say audio drama's also suffering with that a little bit. There's much more looking for production partners, co-funders on projects, whereas a couple of years ago, I'd say, everyone was trying to stake out a bit of audio drama with the idea that it would be optioned, turned into a TV show, it would be evergreen, it would be a great investment. And so lots of companies were splashing out money to get into that space. And I think some of them got their fingers burnt, found that it was much harder to recoup the investment that they made through the traditional podcasting model of free to download advertising. They found advertisers weren't really that interested in advertising in fiction podcasts. They preferred presenters that had audience engagement. So
it's hard to get one of a lead actor to do a live read for a sponsor in a piece, isn't it?
It is, and also they'd sort of break out a character. And it would be more like a sort of TV ad than a presenter seamlessly, saying, "Oh, by the way, my new bed sheets are so comfortable."
Product placement. Maybe that's the answer.
Product placement, yeah. But there's a lot more co-production, and some of the companies like Sony, like Realm, who 2 years ago would have, commissioned something outright, are now looking for partners. To some extent, BBC as well. So, yeah.
Let's have a listen of one of the things you're really well known for, and that's Passenger List.
Hi, I checked the incoming passenger list for Bradford. Only one hit, so we're in luck. It looks like he flew in from New York today with his mother, Maria Elian.
Is that your mum's name, Bradford? Maria?
Falla muta la mica di lì, mai che tu Maria les casa.
I think that was a nod. Let's get the page out for Maria.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. They were booked on a flight to Sofia, Bulgaria.
Even better, so we can get Bradford over to...
No, hold on. Their flight already left, and Maria wasn't on it.
So she's still in the airport then?
No. She's on a flight back to New York. Atlantic Airlines, flight 702.
Bradford, don't worry, sweetie. We're going to find your mummy.
Breaking news tonight. Breaking news this hour. A plane has crashed.
Atlantic Flight 702 from London Heathrow was expected in New York at Flight 702. Atlantic Flight 702.
Reports radar contact with the plane was lost. All people on board are now
but I think everyone here is bracing themselves for the worst.
So that was Passenger List, made for Radiotopia?
Yeah, I mean, it had a bit of a checkered history. I worked for a company called Panoply in New York for 2 years. It subsequently became Megaphone. They focused on the technology side of being a platform, and they got rid of their editorial side and stopped making shows. And Passenger List was commissioned when I was there. And we had gone into production, we'd recorded it, but we hadn't edited it when they closed down the editorial side. So for about 6 months, we were just sort of shopping it around. Panoply obviously wanted to recoup some of its investment. They weren't interested in doing anything else with it, and we contacted a few people. So it really seemed like it wouldn't see the light of day. But Radiotopia, PRX Radiotopia, bought it at quite a reasonable price, I would say, and really got behind it. Marketed it extremely well at a time when there wasn't that much there. So it was probably easier when that was released to get a bit of traction. But so they didn't actually commission it, but they then did subsequently commission the second season, which they paid for outright. Yeah,
at a much better rate, I hope.
Yeah, it's probably our most successful show, weirdly, that we've ever made. Just in terms of the sheer numbers, it just so many of the plates have to come into alignment for a show to work, and it was just the timing was perfect. It was the right kind of show. It was very podcast friendly because the way it was structured was it's essentially an interview show. It's a plane disappears. The relative, a sister of one of the passengers on the plane, does not believe the official line on this and goes on her own investigation, interviewing other family members. So it's very much like a podcast. It's a series of interviews. If you miss some of it and come back to it, she's still interviewing. That's what happened to the plane. So you can't really get lost. So it sort of worked very well on a number of levels.
I think sort of radio drama, audio drama has been sort of on an interesting journey. So if you think Radio 4 was probably the only people that would buy UK originated material, I guess even 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's I mean, I never expected to be working in audio drama. When I was at university, I was going to be a film director, TV, and the opportunities just kept coming, So I listened to Radio 4 drama and thought, there's an opportunity here because everything is done in the same way. There's an opportunity to do it differently. And that was my pitch to the BBC. And ever since, I've been making radio dramas for the BBC. And as you say, they were the only people that were commissioning it. So that was the only market. The way to get shows commissioned was to offer them something different to what they could do in-house. So I was doing that. But there was this overriding sense that this was a declining medium, that radio drama was on its way out. It had been dead in the United States for 50 years, since Orson Welles, and the rest of the world, it was all kind of closing down. So throughout my whole career, there's been this kind of dark cloud of you're working in a business that's about to disappear. And then, of course, podcasts came along because of smartphones and all that. And with fiction, with audio fiction, there was suddenly this blooming in the States particularly, where a young audience felt that there was this incredibly exciting new medium that had just been invented as far as they were concerned, because they never knew it. So it was a very different type of audience, whereas in the UK it's always associated with a kind of aging audience that's sort of dying off. In the States, suddenly it was reinvigorated, and there were a lot of creators who, because they hadn't been listening to Radio 4 and just approached it completely differently, had no rules whatsoever, were sort of experimenting, and some very exciting things came out of it, and so the whole thing was reinvented.
I mean, Paul, it's interesting, isn't it, how these things can reignite, that you think, hey, I'm in the Radio 4 drama business, and then suddenly the world changes on a dime.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I was at the BBC when Radio 4 Drama was exactly as you describe. And we had this thing called Radio Review Board. And we had to listen to stuff. So I had to listen to a drama every single week. And I mean, it was beautifully done, but they were all the same. They're all cut from the same cloth. And it was just, institutionalized within the BBC. And I think, it's great that you're able to find ways to do things other than the BBC, because the BBC just can do some things brilliantly and some things it just cannot do.
I mean, the other kind of connection there is there's lots of people who made programming for the BBC, and that's kind of all they did. Obviously, you've expanded, the opportunities have grown, and your company itself had a sort of an acquisition or a major involvement from another operator, PodX. Was that an interesting conversation to go through? Is that something you'd expected, someone to want to jump in and take a chunk of your company?
I mean, it was nice, and it was good for us personally, because we were a very small company. It's basically me and my wife Aisha set it up. And by the way, we never worked at the BBC. We just pitched shows at the BBC, and so our life was essentially going from one project to the next. And if we spent less than the budget, we were happy. If we spent more than it, there was a problem, And so I think what PodX have done is sort of helped us build it as a business. It wasn't altogether a surprise. We had been approached by other companies before PodX, because we had sort of somehow managed to carve a space. Let's face it, it's a very niche part of the podcasting industry, so maybe it's not such an achievement, but we'd carved a kind of space in fiction podcasts and had a very kind of clear sense of what we were doing, the type of shows we wanted to make. And so PodX coming along helped us make it more of a business than just a sort of a freelance operation, and brought some structure to it, and actually sort of freed us up, because they're very kind of long-termist. They're Swedes. They really understand the long-term thing. And so when the industry goes up and down, and podcasting industry changes so much so quickly, and the last couple of years in media generally has been very difficult, in TV and stuff like that, that doesn't sort of seem to bother them. They're looking much further forward, and they see those sort of dips as opportunities actually to bring in, to pick up stuff that's falling apart and pull it in. Yeah.
And so what's next out the door?
Well, we're doing another series of our CIA show with Kim Cattrall and Ed Harris, which is for the BBC, and it's called Central Intelligence. We're hoping we're going to do 4 seasons eventually. We'll see. But they just commission one series at a time. And that's been a big project for us over the last 18 months or so. We're also doing a project that I can't say anything about for Marvel, but it's a secret big Marvel project. Yep. And we're doing a show
Does that insert you into the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
It does. And in a very, very surprising way. It's a character from the Marvel Universe that, I'm not going to say who it is, and it's also, there's a sort of locality part to it that
you can work also can't drop an email.
They're very kind of keen on NDAs and all that sort of thing. You have to be very careful with that. Yeah,
both your hands would be chopped off.
Yeah. And we're doing a project for iHeart about Buzz Aldrin with John Lithgow.
Are big stars important for these shows to work? Are they shortcut for
marketing?
marketing?
I mean, the thing is, the commissioners often want that, and it's kind of interesting. I think Audible have changed the way the market works quite a lot, because they have been paying very large fees, and so agents are used to getting that. And I guess from a marketing point of view, you need something if you want to market the show, which generally the BBC don't, in the past haven't done very much, but they're really catching up on that. But companies outside the BBC really do want to market it, and so they need something to hang it off. But it does change the way you make the show. It's very rare that you can get that A-lister for more than a short amount of time. So you kind of got to get them into the studio pretty much on their own, read all their lines, and then somehow stitch that in and make it feel like, it's real. And that's a completely different way to how we used to work. But increasingly we are doing that, because a lot of commissioners do want A-listers.
I mean, talent's so important, Paul, isn't it? For every platform, every broadcaster, if you are well known and good at your job, you can do all right.
Yeah, you are. And I mean, look, talent does sell, whatever it is. In the kids business, celebrity voices on an animated show are usually universally successful. It's finding the talent that's willing to work with you for a reasonable price and has global appropriateness. That's the difficulty, actually. And that's the thing with sports stars, of course. They don't always work in every market.
What can an object tell us about the conflicts that have shaped our world? Conflict of Interest is the podcast that invites celebrity guests to Imperial War Museum London for a carefully curated tour of our most revealing artefacts. Join Cerys Matthews, Phil Wang, Eddie Izzard, Jamali Maddox, Kerry Mulligan and more as they get to grips with the history of Afghanistan, the Malayan Emergency or the Vietnam War. That's Conflict of Interest from Imperial War Museums. Series 3 out now.
Okay, just enough time for the quiz. Let's see how much you've both been paying attention to media news this week. This week's is entitled Big Dogs, New Tricks. A few established names have been bringing out new projects recently, but can you identify the stories from these cryptic questions? Producer Matt loves a cryptic clue, right? Best of three. Buzz in if you know the answer. So your name's your buzzers. So Paul, you will say
Paul.
And John, you'll say
John.
Right, let's play Big Dogs, New Tricks. Question number 1. Which soap is having a one-night stand
Paul.
with Oh, yes, Paul.
Is it EastEnders?
Yes, this is EastEnders. What have I?
So this is they're going to for their 40th anniversary. They started in 1975.
1985.
85, you're right. That was 50 years, isn't it? 1985. That's right, because they'd Wogan and they had EastEnders alternating, didn't they? 1985. They're going to allow the audience to determine the future of this character, Denise.
Yes.
I have no idea who she is, but I'm sure she's wonderful.
Yeah, so she's, this is whether she ends up with either Jack or Ravi.
Okay, and that's the choice, is it?
That's the choice. Do you think, I mean, interactivity in drama has always been, it's always been there. People have experimented with it. Netflix have done some experimentation. Is it good or just a bit of a cheap ploy?
I think it's a bit of a gimmick. You know, there was a lot of talk around the technology, and there have been, I think even the BBC has sort of experimented on different stations where you can sort of switch at certain points to a different part of the story. I think it's a bit of a gimmick.
Okay, right. Question number 2. Which knockoff of a spin-off reached 1 million UK viewers on Amazon Prime in December? Knockoff of a spin-off. Amazon Prime, big show on Amazon Prime. So this is Mr. Beast.
Oh, Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast. So this is Beast Games with the largest cash prize in history of $5 million. Also, Netflix's Squid Games Season 2 achieved 2 million since Boxing Day. Its spin-off game show also hit 2 million within 7 days as well. Paul, have you watched Beast Games?
I have not.
As
you can probably tell by my not knowing the answer to that question at all. Squid Games, yes.
Have you watched Season 2?
No, only Season 1.
Have you?
I didn't like it.
Not a big
Too
fan.
violent for me.
Question number 3. Which trillion-dollar company faces pushback on its AI news service? Oh, Paul, yes.
This is Apple.
Yes.
And they're claiming they're going to update their AI features, which have been resulting in all sorts of rather odd stories. Certain tennis player coming out as gay, people saying they'd shot somebody and they hadn't. I mean, it's disaster. Yeah. I mean, AI is great, but you've got to have a human editor on it. I mean, I think we're dubbing kid stuff, with AI. And it's great. It's really effective, but you've got to have somebody to supervise it and check it. And if you don't, you get into hot water like this. So I think this is about their brand. Apple can't afford to have brand damage.
I thought it was interesting because initially they'd sort of shortened a BBC news story.
Yeah, BBC complained to them.
Yeah, into sort of a push alert. But they've come out and said actually we're going to have a look at this. It's sort of the shorter you get, the worse it gets.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think also, given they've got a consumer electronics business, which is the envy of the world. Any damage elsewhere in the business will do damage to that.
Right. Well, congratulations, Paul. 2 points out of 3.
What's the prize?
The prize is actually to work out who's going to do our AI summaries here.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to you on that then.
Good. Excellent. And John, next time you have to work quite hard.
I'll work a bit harder. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you both for joining me, Paul. How can people keep up with what you're up to? What's next on your kids' empire?
Trying to stay here and not travel. But the deal with LG is about to be done, and we'll just keep sort of trying to paper in the globe. LinkedIn is the best place.
Good. And John, when's your CIA Series 2?
Early summer.
Lovely.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Well, we'll keep an ear out for that. And how can people find out about Goldhawk?
Well, we've got a website. We've got lots of podcasts. They could Google us.
Goldhawk Productions website to see all of your fine work. Probably the best way. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to you as well for joining us. Remember, you can go to themediaclub.com to sign up for free to get weekly updates from the show. You can also follow us in all your favourite podcast apps so you get a new episode when we make one. My name's Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next week.